So, you know? No. Well, aim the camera, right?
You're going to be on burn.
Well, I gotta make announcements.
It's always something.
It's always something.
Am I on?
We're on.
Okay.
Pretty nice, actually.
Hello, everybody. Second night. So the second class. Okay, first off, I gotta make some announcements. I've made an executive decision that my next class will not be this Sunday, because not only because it's service Sunday, but because I need more time to prepare, because I want these classes to be really good, and I need a lot of time. So the next class after tonight is going to be Sunday afternoon, June 27th, from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. And that's the next class. And then the class after that, we're not going to do the 4th of July for obvious reasons. It'll be July 11th, July 18th, and July 25th. Those are all Sunday afternoons from 3 to 5 p.m. So.
Mike may not know the obvious reason. Since
4th of July? Oh, okay. It's just a celebration day and most people aren't going to be around. We're going to be having barbecues and cookouts and all that kind of thing. So, that's the announcement. Is that clear?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
It's going to be on there too. So. All right. And with that, Bart, we'll start the class. Okay. And first, basically, we're going to continue with chapter 1 because I didn't finish everything and it's very interesting stuff. So we're going to continue with chapter 1 that I missed, and then we're going to move into chapter 2, which is reason and intuition. Are you on my slides, Bart? Oops. That goes fast. Okay, I like this quote. So, basically, the eye sees only what the mind is prepared to comprehend. I got this from a psychology site, and I thought it was really cool. So, yeah, there's that. Okay, so slide 1. This is from chapter 1. The objective mind was developed to take care of new situations. Life forms must make repeated adaptations to their environment if they want to survive. Change is always happening, and they must take appropriate action to prevent their own destruction in light of constant change. And this is kind of re-quoting Zane's material and reorganizing it and putting a few of my own words in there, but it's a lot of this is Zane's wording, so just to let you all know. The experiences in the bodies of all life forms are retained in the thought cells and thought structures of the unconscious mind, and increase the life form's ability to meet new situations successfully. Soon the life forms had enough experiences of one type that the energies of the thought cells involved in that one type of situation become so accustomed to acting together that adaptation becomes habitual.
Now, what was that? What? That first one? The experiences
in the body of all life forms are retained in the thought cells and the thought structures of the unconscious mind.
Okay.
So in the astral realm.
So everything is residing in the astral.
Right, in your unconscious mind, which is on the astral plane. So adaptation becomes habitual. Okay, and basically Zane is talking about the evolution of the objective consciousness. This is all the evolution of objective consciousness through various life forms up through the animal kingdom, including humans. So he's kind of explaining the evolution of the objective mind, which is different from the unconscious mind, right? Yes, not separate, but kind of different. Okay, where are we at? Slide 4, slide 5. Okay, when a habit is formed, one doesn't have to pay conscious attention to the details of actions. We all know that, right? And when one doesn't have to pay attention to the details, it is then said to be directed by the soul or unconscious mind. So when you form a habit, basically your unconscious mind is taking over and is going by that habit.
Is it pretty much like the autonomic?
Yeah, kind of like autonomic, but the habit has to be formed by you first. Now, I'm not talking about like the breathing and
Oh, okay.
the stuff like that. I'm talking about a habit.
Okay.
Something you do every day. You wake up at 7:30 every morning. That becomes a habit. Your unconscious mind takes over, and whether you want to or not, you're waking up at 7:30 every morning, right?
Right.
It's your unconscious is taking over, and it knows. You form the habit, and then the unconscious mind takes over and repeats that habit. And that's why habits are hard to break, because they go into the unconscious mind, right?
Yeah. Well, that little unconscious mind is
Pretty
proactive sometimes.
It's taking over, and you go, wait a minute, I want to wake up at 9 tomorrow morning. No, your unconscious goes, no, that's a habit, we formed it, we're doing it.
We like it. It's
So
good.
that's what this is, what he's talking about.
Okay.
The habitual responses to situations are then taken care of by the unconscious mind. Okay, so where I would say 5, 6. When a new situation is present, however, that no habit has been established, the new problem taxes the intelligence of the organism. To meet these new problems, the cortex of the brain evolved, which permits intelligence to override feelings and wishes. So this again is Zane talking about the evolution of the objective consciousness. So that's why he's talking about the brain evolving. And the taxing of the intelligence when a new thing is established. I'll give an example of that. I used to go to a chiropractor regularly. Or not regularly, but whenever my back got out of whack. My back got out of whack, I go back to him, and he made the situation worse. And I was in pain. So, new situation. The problem was not solved. So, my feelings and wishes went out the door, and I wanted to take care of this new situation. So, my objective consciousness was working overload to solve this problem. My intelligence was being taxed. I did not care about my old chiropractor's feelings. I did not care about leisure time when I'm off work. I cared about taking care of this new situation. So all of my energy was going towards that, solving that problem. And I think that's what he's talking about. And your intelligence is being taxed by new situations. Okay, so when the intelligence examines, compares, relates, and decides issues, among other functions in the brain, this is termed objective consciousness. So your objective consciousness is what's taking care of new situations, you're making the decisions, you're doing the logic, you're deciding things. That's objective consciousness.
Does it only deal with new situations, though?
Yeah, I kind of wondered about that too. Like, really? And the more I went through this and found, and really was looking through the material more and found out what the unconscious does and what the objective conscious does, I realized it probably does. I mean, and not only, you can make your objective consciousness more aware of new things and new situations, and you can make yourself aware of your habits that you have formed. And that's what your objective consciousness can do. So, yeah, your objective consciousness, I think what Zane was talking about was it evolved to take care of new situations.
I wonder if that's what it means to be open-minded, to let new information in so that it becomes more objective. Is that
Yeah.
You think?
Yes, absolutely. I agree with that statement.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yep. And so we will talk about objective consciousness more after we talk about the brain. This was really interesting. So I went onto some websites, and I just wanted to know a little bit about the physical brain. So obviously this is not from Zane's stuff. But so we have 3 main areas and then 3 inner areas that I want to talk about. Of course, scientists divide them up into a million different pieces. But I just wanted to kind of touch on the main parts of it. Cerebrum, the largest part of the brain. I'm going to show a picture again, so we'll see it. It's 85% of the weight. The cerebellum is the smaller part back and below the cerebrum. The brain stem connects the brain to the spinal cord. And this is the inner This is the inner 3, and we'll talk about that more too. So this is all these lobes all are the cerebrum. This is the cerebellum, and these 2 things are the brainstem. They call them, scientists like to call everything different things. But
That's a good thing.
yeah. But I just wanted the general gist. That was the main parts. Now the inner parts, the thalamus, which is here, it's pointing to this region right here. The hypothalamus is not on this drawing, but hypo means under. So hyper, under the thalamus. So it's kind of like in there. It's a small little area. The amygdala is a pea size right there. And the hippocampus, because I found out what that does and it was very interesting, so I added it at the end. So basically what these things do is the cerebrum controls your voluntary muscles. Your higher thinking, interpretation of vision, reasoning, creativity, processing, pain, and pressure. The right half allows you to think about abstract things like music, colors, and shapes, and the left half controls speech, logic, analytical thinking, and math problems. So if you have a hard time with math problems, it's your left half of the brain, which controls the right side of your body. So always remember that. The cerebellum, which is really interesting, controls balance, posture, movement, and coordination, or how your muscles work together, which is kind of important. And I never knew that. I thought that was interesting. And then your brainstem controls life-sustaining functions like breathing, heartbeat, blood circulation, digestion. It's also responsible for keeping the brain awake and alert. Objective consciousness is maintained by an arousal system called the RAS. So I thought that was very interesting. That's where your brainstem, because otherwise I guess your brain would fall asleep and go into unconscious all the time. So it needed a stimulus.
Right. Well, it's not as highly evolved as isn't it considered to be more reptilian?
I don't know.
Okay.
I didn't read that part. I just wanted to kind of touch on this because it kind of fascinated me a little bit. I didn't really go into it a whole lot.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, the brainstem really is in control of the autonomous nervous system,
Yeah.
autonomic nervous system, which is the primitive side of the unconscious mind, you might say.
It would be like the primitive side of taking care of your survival, right?
Right.
So your instinct, like instinct in animals,
Right. You're lower.
probably use that. Have to. That's what I'm thinking. Is that right?
Somebody's got to be on the job 24/7.
Right.
So the brainstem is there.
Right.
Right.
And it's keeping you awake.
I think that's what Zane might be referring to when he talks about the lower animal functions
Okay.
that we inherit,
Right.
and they sometimes can go out of control.
You have a big brainstem. Yeah, and I guess I have a problem with certain words because they have different meanings for me. And so when I'm reading Zane, to me, primitive sounds like, your animalistic urges, but maybe, and I got to get rid of that connotation and understand what he was trying to convey.
Right.
And,
It's okay to be primitive.
It's a
It's
pre-perception.
appropriate.
Right, perception, we're going to go through that. Okay, so the inner parts of the brain, the thalamus acts as an information relay station. It receives sensory information from the body and relays it back to the cortex, which is the brain. The hypothalamus is a small pea-sized area that controls temperature regulation, appetite, sleep-wake cycle, and hormones, which is controlled by the pituitary gland located near the hypothalamus. The amygdala, shaped like an almond, that's why it's called the amygdala, attaches emotional significance to information, which is interesting. And then the hippocampus, I added because it says it was involved with recognition and learning that something is new, and also with short-term and long-term memory, which I thought was interesting. So, I thought I had another picture, but it's all right. So, just to reiterate, that's the picture. Thalamus, the hippocampus. The amygdala was the emotional center. I just thought it was fascinating that all these things have to go on just for you to be awake and alive and, I just found it, I woke up this morning finding it amazing that there were so many processes going on in my body, that the brain, you know, all these functions were going on, and this amazing piece of machinery, and it's like it's all being taken care of. You know? I just find it fascinating. And for the life of me, I thought Zane had talked about white matter and gray matter, and that's why I got this picture. And then as I'm going through it, I can't find where I read that. So I don't know. That's why this picture is up there. But anyway, white matter is inside. The gray matter is what, all the folds and stuff you see on the picture of a brain. So that's why that's there. Okay, anyway, back to objective consciousness and how it works. So we're still on chapter 1. Objective mind was developed to care of situations. Okay. Objective consciousness is chiefly concerned with new physical and mental adjustments. Objective consciousness becomes active only at the point of conflict of an organism with its environment. Again, I think that's Zane talking about the evolution of objective consciousness, because it feels like our objective consciousness does more than just this. But I don't know. We'd have to analyze it and see. Maybe we think we're doing more than what we're actually just doing. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I really.
Yeah. This is what Zane says. Anyway.
Well, he calls it a conflict
of an organism with the environment. Just any new situation that you come across.
I think that to me it kind of makes sense, because if you didn't have an environment to interact with,
right?
What would you?
Maybe you'd just be unconscious all the time.
Right.
You'd just be running on things, whatever. I don't know. Hard to imagine, right?
Right. Yeah. And you know, I don't know what other people's experience of new is, but frequently new situations are filled with conflict. When
That's
you're
true.
bringing a new environment or a new situation, there's a problem to be solved, usually is associated. Although there are some people, I guess, who are just really easygoing and just kind of love your life.
But there's always conflict. Everywhere we go, somewhere, we'll find it. So, objective consciousness concentrates the mental energies in such a way as the better to overcome the resistances of new situations. The objective consciousness can only do so many things at one time. And this was fascinating when I came across this, because an example here.
Unless you're a woman.
Yeah, no, check this out.
You can multitask.
All right, think about all this. Can you make sure that your heart is beating, that you're breathing properly, that you talk to a person on the phone while thinking about what you need to make to dinner, while driving your car, making sure you don't go through red lights or hit someone, all while composing a piece of music all in your head at the same time? Could you do that? No. I doubt it.
I can't walk and chew gum.
And that is why, when you really think about it, objective consciousness, they say about seven, well, no, that was memory, never mind. But only a few things at the same time can your objective consciousness focus on at one time. I think that's what it's saying, Objective consciousness is not something separate from the unconscious mind. Objective consciousness has its important and special functions to perform in life, but it cannot be considered a different mind than the unconscious mind. This is Zane's words. Because the soul, which equals the mind, which equals the unconscious, which equals the character, all connect up with the physical brain to express as objective consciousness. So these two aren't separate. They're kind of all connected. But we use our objective consciousness to access our unconscious, right? Because our unconscious does a lot. I'll show you more about what our unconscious does do. Again, the soul equals mind equals unconscious mind, which equals the character, thus embraces all states of consciousness of the organism. Does that make sense? Yeah, the objective consciousness is the expression of all these states, I think. I don't know. I can't figure it out. I think I have it and then it goes away. I don't know.
Well, there is a delineation between the objective mind and the unconscious mind. The unconscious mind can transmit information to the objective mind when it deems necessary to do so.
Right.
But the objective mind really is while it's not a separate entity, it operates on a separate frequency. Pretty much most of the time. It can be totally oblivious to
Right.
what the unconscious mind is aware of.
Absolutely.
So if you think of it that way.
Absolutely. But Zane wanted to say that in his book, and I read it a couple of places, that they're not separate. That's what he wanted to
Yeah.
say. So I'm interpreting the book, and
No, they're not separate.
Right.
But they do operate on different frequencies, and so
I believe that.
that would be, it would be nice if you could just at will call up things from the unconscious mind, but it doesn't always, there's no seamless
Right.
boundary.
Exactly.
Well, some of it's buried so deep in there.
Right?
Some of it you wouldn't want to recall anyway.
Right? Oh, I was supposed to do something. Okay. But the objective mind embraces only those states of consciousness that communicate their energies from the unconscious mind to the physical cells of the brain, which can then be recognized. Okay, I wanted to kind of draw something, just exactly what you were talking about. I'm going to draw something over here, because I had it in my brain today. Of course, this is different than the other board, the bigger board. Not being cooperative.
Do you want the bigger one?
No. Okay. So the unconscious mind basically has no filters and takes in all the raw data. It's like a child that doesn't examine what is good or bad, nor what the intention is in the information it receives. It takes in everything literally like children do. You know, you can imagine that. Your unconscious is taking in, like, basically all these thoughts. And it's not discriminating against the thoughts, right?
Right.
It's just kind of taking it in. Here's your unconscious. And think of a child. I had just had my niece visiting, and I was listening to a tape, cassette on tape, whatever, book on tape. And I was making sure there was nothing being said that she would find offensive, but there was literary words were being used, and I was shocked because I thought, oh my God, 11-year-old's brain does not understand that she's just using these words to be more descriptive, and that she doesn't mean them literally. Like she said, she was talking about birds in the square in Italy, and that, you know, the birds were being right there in front of everybody. But she was talking about birds, and she was just trying to be descriptive, and she, you know, and my niece heard that word, and she thought literally, and she didn't hear about that they were talking about birds. And so her mind is taking that in.
Right.
Her unconscious is taking it in, whether, you know, without discrimination, that these are just literary, not meant to be taken literally, you know? I was like, oh God, I'm damaging my niece.
Well, it's good for them to learn how to distinguish the different stuff. That's a giant leap.
Right? But children do. They take in everything. They're listening. You ever have a kid that's listening off to the side, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they hear everything you say.
Right.
And then they repeat it. And they don't even know what context you're using it in.
Right.
Yeah, that's how the unconscious is doing. And so that's why you're not knowing what's going on with your unconscious all the time. It's taking in everything. So then not only is it taking in thoughts, it's taking in all sensory data. Your unconscious is taking in all sensory data. Your eyes are focused in one direction, but you see all this peripheral that's being absorbed in your unconscious. This is your conscious thoughts. It's taking those in too. Literally. You know, all those negative things you say in your head, I'm not good enough, da 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 da. Your unconscious is taking it in. Then it's taking in sensory data. Then taking in cultural contexts, beliefs that you grew up with. Cultural. Family beliefs. Family history and genetic makeup. And then it's also taking in from the astral plane all the data that's coming in. So it's creating, what does this look like? It looks like a little vortex. A little circle. I want to draw. That now your objective consciousness wants to make a decision out here. It has to come through all of that to make the decision. And this is why you are being conditioned by so many things without even realizing it. It's coming through all these filters. So if you think of this as like a lens that's closing in and allowing only those thoughts that it has taken in from the unconscious, it's like a filter or a lens. Mm-hmm. So you think you're making a decision with all of your mental brain power, but you're coming through all of this that you don't remember or think about because it's in your unconscious, right?
Right.
And this part is what's the most interesting, the astral, because we're also, the unconscious is working on the astral realm, right? So the astral is what? Astrology. Taking in all that astrology. So now, this is where how astrology plays in, because this is when you were born, the planets, the locations, and the astral influences occurring when you're born. That's coming in. And then how they progress. And then where they are now, located now. All that astral data is coming in. All that astral data is also coming into your unconscious. And that's how I think astrology works as well. But you also got all these other filters coming in. But the astrology is affecting you too. And that's why we say, well, why am I acting this way? And why is it showing up in my astrology chart? That's amazing. How does it happen? It's coming into your unconscious and it's forming the filter. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I'll leave that. So I just wanted to draw
Yeah. So when we think we're being really rational and objective,
Yes.
maybe we're not.
Exactly. We're looking through a lens. A filter of sorts. Okay, so back to our presentation. We're on 18. Okay. I know where I'm at. Okay, the objective consciousness is present when the unconscious mind is able to impart energy from its thought cells to the physical nervous system, which creates vibrations in the physical brain. The thought energies in the unconscious mind are connected up with the physical brain cells through the etheric energy transfer body, which interpenetrates the physical body and the astral body. We learned that from last week, right?
Right.
The etheric body is the energy transfer body between the physical and the astral. So the thought energies in the unconscious, which are from the astral, are connected up with the physical brain cells through the etheric body. Because that's where the energy transfer is going. Right. So it's just talking about the energy moving through the nervous system. It has to go through your etheric body to transfer between the unconscious. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Sorry. I'm not talking in full sentences. My objective consciousness is being taxed with new information.
There you go.
Okay, in order to connect up the energy of the thought cells in the astral body with the physical cells in the brain, a chain of relations must be stimulated by some environmental condition. Again, the same wording. And this was, I thought, was interesting about in sleep, the objective consciousness does not function because the thought energies of the unconscious mind are largely disconnected from the physical brain cells. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Dreams are the activities of the unconscious mind and are remembered only when their energies are connected up with the physical brain and then brought into objective consciousness. We're finally in chapter 2 now. But I thought all that stuff was very interesting, so I wanted to go over it. About chapter
The
1.
relationship between the
Objective
conscious and
unconscious, yeah.
which is what reason and intuition is kind of all about.
Yes,
Right?
and now really ties in, and that's why I really had to do it. You know. Okay, we're only at 6:30. That's good. Okay, so in chapter 2, he starts out with the 3 irresistible and hereditary drives, and he'll talk about why they are irresistible and hereditary. The first is the drive for significance, also called the desire for significance or the will to power. The drive for race preservation, which is the reproductive desires, and the drive for self-preservation, which is the nutritive desires. The energy of the spiritual ego is striving to realize its function in the cosmic plan, we learned that last week, for which it is called into existence, and is the driving force behind every pair of souls. Remember the ego? The souls? This urge to fill in its ego's blueprint manifests in all life forms as the struggle to survive and to be something. This urge, the struggle to survive and be something, is the oldest and strongest urge, and is the desire for significance. The sun's position in the birth chart maps the power elements in the astral body. The power elements are the thought elements, which were built into the astral body by experiences that give additional energy to this desire for significance. I think he's just talking about the sun's position in your birth chart is going to show this desire for significance. I think that's what he's saying.
I think, yeah, maybe that will define where you as an individual will look to satisfy those urges.
Yes, that's it. That's it. Where you look to satisfy those urges, the desire for significance and to be something.
Right.
Totally makes sense. Yes. The power elements are the highest and most energetic thought structures in the astral body. The power elements give rise to 2 primeval desires of opposite polarity. They are the reproductive desires and the nutritive desires. The 2 primeval desires are not thought elements, but they are still more primitive factor of which all thought elements are built upon. And he talks about like the protons and electrons in the atom are the building blocks of which all elements of matter are composed. So he's saying those 2 primeval desires of nutritive and reproductive are the elements that are the building blocks of which the psychoplasm in the astral world are composed of, like atoms. That's what he's saying. That's what Zane is saying. The reproductive desire is the positive polarity desire and attains significance through expression outside of the self. It manifests as a tendency to perpetuate the race or in the desire to perform some creative work, and it's positive polarity. The nutritive desires is a negative polarity desire and attains significance through adding something to the self. It manifests as giving rise to all those activities that go towards self-preservation, which in turn gives opportunity for significance. Does that kind of make sense? Mm-hmm. It made sense to me. I was like, yes, something made sense.
Why did it make sense to you?
I don't know. It just kind of just made sense. This we're not going to go into too much about all this. He touches upon it now. I think he gets into it more later in the book. So we're just going to touch upon it because we touched upon the power elements being the sun. But basically he says the original source of energy, the ego, has the drive for significance and to be something. And from this comes the reproductive drive and the nutritive drive. And these combine to form the 10 families of thought elements, which we all know from astrology are all these various things. And that's all I'm going to touch upon. We'll get to other stuff later. I thought that was very interesting. It's like the atoms in the physical world make up all the molecules of matter. And he's saying that these desires all add up into these elements which make up the astral body.
The thought-built body.
Thought-built body, which is the astral body, right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So we identify those more as a way of thinking.
Right.
Okay.
But he talks about them as what goes in and make a number. We'll get into it later. Sorry. All right. We call these drives irresistible because The love of life and the impulse to perpetuate life are so strongly built into the astral body that it is impossible to suppress their energy. We also call these drives hereditary because every living creature is born with them. They have been acquired in all stages of the soul's past. Again, I just wanted to reiterate what the first slide had on these. All of these. So. Okay, now moving on. Sensation. I like this picture.
It looks like an astral world in there.
Right? Going on, all these little things going on. All right, sensation, very interesting stuff. Is the process by which our senses gather information and send it to the brain. A large amount of information is being sensed at any one time, such as room temperature, someone talking, smell of perfume, the sound of a distant train. But as stimuli becomes redundant, a distant train, say for instance, or remains unchanged for a long time, the smell of a perfume, for instance, we adapt to those stimuli and we become less sensitive for those stimulus. After all, if it doesn't change, why would we waste so much energy constantly sensing it? So that makes sense, right? According to Zane, sensations are commonly the stimuli which produce physical motions. He talks about two different nerves in the book. And this is why I put them in, because they were in the book. Afferent nerves, and then of course I looked on the internet, and that's what they call them in science. Afferent nerves are ingoing nerves, the nerves that transmit messages or electric motions from the body to the brain. And then the efferent nerves are outgoing nerves, nerves that carry messages from the brain back to the same point. Or back to the point that it hit.
So they're like the positive and the negative.
Yeah. Sort of,
System.
yeah, and also you can think of them as like the arteries and the veins. The arteries are going to the heart, the veins are going away from the heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the nerves, there's two sets of nerves as well. Okay, this I got from the internet. Nerves, it is the spinal cord and the nerves that let messages flow back and forth between the brain and the body. The nervous system is made up of millions of neurons, brain cells, which have tiny branches coming off of them that allow them to connect to other neurons. And I have this great picture. I don't know, Barb, if you want to like zoom in on this. I couldn't get it back up from the internet to put it in my PowerPoint presentation, but I thought it was very interesting. This is a nerve cell. So. And
Use your pointer.
yeah.
Can you use your pointer?
Yeah. So this is a damaged nerve, and so I got it from the multiple sclerosis website.
So the point of that is just that it's.
I wanted to show, because I thought nerves were something other than cells, but it's a cell. And it has a different function. Like we have heart cells, liver cells. I just when I point out stuff, it's because I usually find something fascinating, and I did because I thought nerves were something other than just cells. I don't know why.
Yeah.
It just hit me. So a nerve, and it has all these little things coming out. And what's fascinating is when you were born, your brain came with all the neurons that will ever have. But many of them were not connected to each other. When you learn things, new things, the messages travel from one neuron to another over and over again, eventually creating a strong pathway that allows the brain to do the same process over and over again without expending energy, like thinking about it so much, like riding a bike or driving a car.
Or learning to do math.
Or learning to do math.
Or do, yeah.
Anything.
But which is why homework is important. I beat that drum.
But I thought it was so interesting because these things connect with the other neurons, and then it starts forming pathways. Right. And that is where your habits form, over those pathways of the neurons in your brain. I love when things don't make sense for me. Whoa, 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 what happened? I don't know what happened there.
Oh, it's trying to, it's just say no.
Okay.
Just say, yeah, just go click on
Do it
no.
here.
Oh, okay. Must have been some automatic thing.
Where was I? Okay, nerves. Okay. A simple sensation, this is back to Zane's wording here. A simple sensation begins with a disturbance or vibration at the end of a sensory nerve receptor, which travels along the nerve and is sent to the brain cells, where it gives up its motion, called a nerve discharge, and is then felt as a sensation. This results in movement to the etheric body. This electric motion moves into the etheric body and communicates its energy to the astral body. Remember the etheric is the energy transfer body? This energy communicated to the astral body goes into that same area where similar previous experiences are recorded. There is objective consciousness of this sensation so long as the etheric motions in the physical brain cells vibrate with the energy that gets communicated to the astral body. But when the etheric motions of the sensation subside, all the objective consciousness of that sensation ceases. Does that make sense? That this, and I was trying to understand this, and what I've come to realize is that if there is a sensation in your arm, like a pin being pricked in your arm, and it goes over the nerves and it goes to your brain and it senses that, if you are unconscious or in a coma, you're not going to know that that happened, right? Your brain will know.
Adhere to it
Your brain knows that your body was pricked by a pin, but you, in your objective consciousness, will not know that that happened. Therefore, that's what he's talking about being communicated to the astral body, where your unconscious mind is, where your everything is, where everything gets remembered. So when I realized that, I was like, oh, well, that makes sense. So even though things are going on in the physical world with your body and your brain is sensing it, if you're not conscious, if you're not connected by the etheric body and the astral, you're not going to know that that's happening. Isn't that interesting? I just find that fascinating.
So you mean there's some choice about what you pay attention to?
In my mind, it means that the astral world, the unconscious mind, is very important to what comes into your objective consciousness. Like all these things in the physical can go on, but when you're unconscious, it doesn't, like, it's not even going to occur to you. I don't know, I'm not saying the right words for it.
Well, but it's like, I mean, your conscious mind is more or less like a filter for what you're perceiving or you're sensing.
Yeah, and that what Zane is saying that is that the emotions have to be communicated to the etheric body, and then move into the astral body for your objective consciousness to know about it.
Oh, God.
Yeah, and if your etheric body is not communicating to the astral body, then you're not going to be there. You're going to be unconscious.
Huh.
It kind of, to me, it made it connect us more with the thought-built world, the astral world, the unconscious, and all that.
It's kind of like an on-off switch, for, say you had an electric current coming into your finger, not that you'd want to, but let's just say that somebody had an on-off switch. Well, you turn it on, then all of a sudden you go, oh, I don't like that sensation, and then turn it off, and so they turn it off and it goes away. But it has to, everything that we take in is registered with all the way to the astral body, all the way into the very core, which is beyond us, in the unknown consciousness that exists out there in the celestial sphere, which we're all plugged into especially when we're in the dream state. But when that particular stimulus disappears, then our objective consciousness, if we're awake, realizes that it's disappeared, So that connection is no longer there. That off switch has interrupted that flow of sensation to us.
Right.
Right.
That's great. Yes, exactly. I'm glad you explained it a little better.
But everything goes, I guess, from what I just read this today, and it appears to me that everything goes into the astral pool of knowledge. Whether we realize that it's going in there or not,
Right.
it's all going in there. And objective consciousness allows us to access it, but we have to learn how to make the pathways to access it.
Yes, exactly. I love how you explained it.
I'm a communicator.
That's great. So you'll be teaching some classes one of these days. Okay, so this is a new slide. The vibration imparted to the etheric substance communicates the energy from the astral thought cells to the physical brain cells. This again is the connection, the etheric body. The sensation is better remembered when the vibrations imparted to the etheric substance resemble the original nerve discharge. I'm not quite sure what that's meaning, but etheric.
Well, the closer it is,
it resembles.
yeah, the closer it is, you have something familiar. It's like, it's easier to deal.
Oh, the
When
original.
things are familiar, it's easier to understand them.
Oh,
A
right.
point of reference.
Oh,
Right.
okay. A
Right.
pinprick. I've had a pinprick. I know what that
Right.
is.
Right.
It's so I can put it into that compartment. It's a pinprick.
Right.
As opposed to something new I've never felt before. I don't know where that goes.
I don't know how long it'll last.
Right.
Is it going to kill me?
Right. Okay. Etheric substance communicates the energy from the astral thought cells to the physical brain. So again, I think he's just reiterating all about the etheric body, the communication between the astral and the physical is the etheric, and you have to go through the etheric. That's my interpretation. Oop. This thing goes fast. I might skip some of these. But anyway, physical scientists believe we have 5 sense organs for obtaining information about our physical environment. But ancient wise men recognized 7 physical senses and also 7 psychic senses. These 7 psychic senses are used so the soul could appraise itself of the conditions in the astral environment. Interesting. I don't know where Zane got that information, but it was in his book.
I think it's probably traditional knowledge. And I think, because they had a lot of spiritual knowledge that we've become so physically oriented that we're kind of numb to it, I think.
Because the psychic senses do not send messages over a physical nerve, nor by means of the etheric motion, it does not register directly on the cells of the physical brain. So that's why we don't always have access to the psychic senses. Vibration in the astral substance are used to carry motions of a psychic sensation to the thought cells of the astral body. And they are registered in the thought cells as much as physical sensation is registered in the brain. So I guess he's saying, like, on the astral plane, we have astral senses, and those are the psychic senses. And then he's saying there's 7 of them. That's what it said, I guess. Thus, when suitable conditions arise that enable the psychic energies to impart their motion to the physical brain cells, they are remembered through associated vibrations being set up by etheric energies that connect with the brain. Okay, so he's saying when there's suitable conditions, we can access that psychic senses on the astral realm. The objective consciousness recognizes the report of one of the psychic senses through a bringing up from the unconscious mind something which it has recognized on the astral plane. Yeah, does that make sense? Okay. Perception. I love this little comic. It says, hey, there's no Zen up here, just some old bald guy. The Himalayas. I love it. And that's for perception. Where's the Zen? Okay, so now we're going into perception. And, what slide are we on? 42. Okay. This is Zane's definition of perception. Is awareness of sensation or combination of sensations like various impressions that reach a person from the environment. Perception is the interpretation of what we take in through our senses. And this is the dictionary definition. From psychology, a single unified awareness derived from sensory processes while a stimulus is present, or an act of apprehending by means of the senses or of the mind. So basically, perception has a lot to do with senses, sensations. So yeah. Awareness of a sensation is perception. Perception is never simply the recognition of the energy which has come in over the nerves. It also includes the associated energy that has been stored in the thought cells. So I guess it's the recognition from the previous experiences. Right?
It appears so.
Okay. Sorry. Alright, the soul has been gathering sensations since it came into existence. The energy of the sensations, which we call memory when brought up into the objective consciousness, is retained in the thought cells of the astral body. A sensation coming in stirs up the associated thought cells in the astral body, and these thought cells give up some of their memory energy to the physical cells of the brain. Okay, then apperception and preperception. This word is not in the dictionary, nor is it in any psychology websites. So that's a Zane made-up term. But I like this cartoon. Mirrors that reflect the real you. Half price. Mirrors that reflect the ideal you. So it's gone.
I don't know.
Okay, so apperception, Zane's definition, how an object looks, feels, tastes, smells, or sounds to us, depending more upon the past experiences of the thing or similar thing than it is based on what our senses are actually telling us right then. The dictionary definition is the process of understanding something perceived in the terms of previous knowledge or experience, to be conscious of perceiving. So something touches my leg, it reminds me of when a bug crawled up my leg. I freak out, I think it's a bug, that's my perception, but then I look down and it's a string or something else. So that's apperception. Apperception may give rise to errors in actual perception of the senses. That's what it wasn't a bug, it was a piece of string. But it freaked me out all the same.
Just as real.
The way you perceive yourself and look at the way you really are can be two different things. And that's true, because I've seen myself on video, and it doesn't look like me. This isn't really what I look like. So. At least I don't think so when I'm watching myself. And I'm like, who is that? Okay, so this is Zane's definition. Preperception, an anticipatory mental image, an expectation of an image. An illusion may be produced by associated preperceptions. When we visualize a past experience from memory, even though the original setting of the occurrence has changed or been destroyed, we perceive the thing in the space relations of how we remembered it before. So I remember a house that I grew up in when I was really little, and every time I go back, it's still the same to me, even though a lot has changed. Whenever I remember it, it's still the same. So I guess that's what preperception is. And this is Zane's example in the book, but that's
Of a ventriloquist?
yeah. This is a part of a cartoon. Also, yeah, attention. There are two kinds of attention. And I like this because it pertains to weather. And I'm a weather observer.
You're right.
This is what we do. No, I'm just kidding.
You watch the computer or the app.
Right? I watch the computer and say, oh, look at what the weather is right outside. Okay, so Zane says there's two kinds of attention. Spontaneous attention and directed attention. Spontaneous attention is the attention drawn to a perception or mental process through the energy of the perception or mental process. Okay, so of its own volition, it comes up. Zane gives an example, thinking about an absent loved one all of a sudden. Animals use this kind of attention almost exclusively. Of course, it doesn't kind of go with that, because, I don't know, unless it does. We don't know what animals are thinking, do we? Maybe they are thinking of their partner that died. I don't know.
Or their master, or whatever.
Yeah, they could. We don't know. It can give rise to fantasy thinking, which has its use, but can be the source of many errors. I would say this happens to a lot of us, because if you ever try to meditate, you'll find out that you have a lot of spontaneous attention going on. Things just pop up with your mind left and right, and you're trying to meditate and focus. You have to keep bringing yourself back. No. I want to think about this, not something else. So that happens all the time. Directed attention is attention that is focused in the manner decided upon after a selective appraisal of various possibilities and in spite of other distractions. And that's where the meditation comes in. You have many distractions, not only about what's going on in your environment, but also all those spontaneous thoughts coming up in your head. Directed attention makes possible critical analysis and the separation of facts from beliefs encouraged by desires. So, man is capable of this, but animals are not. Man, however, doesn't always use his attention in this way. So this is a very powerful tool when you can actually use it. And I think that's what meditation helps you to do, is use directed attention. It's creating a pathway for you to, when you're directing your attention in one direction, that it'll stay there and you won't get all this spontaneous jumble all the time. We rarely experience simple sensations because we are always using apperception and preperception. Perceiving things only with related sensations previously stored in the stellar cells of the unconscious mind. Apperception and preperception can be used to increase the range of sense perceptions. So these things aren't always bad, although they do create a lot of our belief systems. What we've previously experienced goes into our unconscious, and when we come across something, like for instance, my relationship with technology has not been very good. So whenever I come across something, my perception is this thing is not going to work. Something's going to go wrong. The computer is not going to work. That's my either apperception or preperception. And so whenever I come across a new computer, I constantly have that belief system that things are going to go wrong. So I think it's a bad thing to have this, but Zane is talking that these can be used to increase the range of sense perceptions.
Well, you could use that to solve a problem, though. You could anticipate an issue that someone might have.
That's true.
And you could then create a solution that might give them a better experience. Or
that's true, because I'm very prepared for things to go wrong with technology in my world. So yeah, when something does go wrong, I don't go into panic mode. I go, oh yeah, let's fix the problem. Let's So you're right. Okay. Next subheading in the book on page 46 is all mental processes are governed by the law of association. In order to interpret what we receive through our senses, we attempt to organize information into certain groups. If you see a dot, you think dot, but if you see 7 dots together, you may say a row of dots. If you didn't group things together, you would think dot, 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 dot. And waste a lot of energy thinking that.
so we're trying to do shorthand.
Right. And what our brain does is it groups things together and puts it into categories. In psychology, and I looked this up, psychology, the default principles of grouping include 4 types: similarity, proximity, continuity, and closure. Zane, however, talks about 2. Of course, he wrote this in the 30s and 40s. So this might have been in psychology what they had, but this is what they talk about now. But we're going to talk about what Zane's talking about. So Zane's definition of contiguity, not continuity, contiguity, is a similarity or dissimilarity of things in time or space. An example, 2 things seen at or near the same spot at a close to the same times are contiguous in space. 2 things seen at or near the same time close to each other in space are contiguous in time. And then the dictionary definition is touching or in contact, and the second definition seems to be the opposite, in close proximity without actually touching or near. These seem contradictory, but they're in the same, I don't know. That's how we use our words, and it changes as we go, right? Changes the dictionary definition of things. And then resemblance, other types of similarity or dissimilarity than those of space or time. We all know what the word resemblance is, right? I mean, Zane's example is a red apple and a baseball resemble each other through form, and a red apple and a red rose resemble each other through color. And the dictionary definition, similarity and appearance. So Zane's law of association is put together something of resemblance and contiguity, which is really space or time resemblance. Whatever enters the mind combines with the factors already there and exerts whatever influence it does according to its resemblance or contiguity. Every mental process is carried out under the influence of resemblance or contiguity, or the law of association, whether in objective consciousness or in the unconscious. So basically that's how we're kind of grouping things. Whenever we're categorizing things to make things easier, we're grouping them in these ways. Sensations combine to form perceptions. I love these little cartoons. That's what I want to be right there.
But would you realize that if you didn't know the other?
If I didn't know I was in the block trapped. That's right, right? Does this guy know he's trapped? He can't see nothing. Okay, so sensations combine to form perceptions. Sensations are the building blocks of which all consciousness is composed. What we perceive, and I think he's talking about objective consciousness. What we perceive is from a combination of sensations, sight, sound, touch, etc., and modified by apperception.
And number 1 up there, sensations, that doesn't pertain to just objective consciousness. That crosses over to sensations will transfer or basically cross over all levels into the astral plane, which they're received by, into the unconscious mind, which they're received by,
That's right.
before they ever get to the objective consciousness. Before they have to be translated by the objective consciousness into a frame of reference that it can, something that it resembles, something that shows contiguity, that it has already learned in those spheres, but it pulls in those sensations that are also registering in those spheres so that we can make some sense out of it. So we can determine what kind of a sensation we think it is.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and you're right. Yeah.
Because from day 1, even before we're born, from what I've read at least, we are pre-programmed.
Right.
Based upon our past lives and all the past experiences and everything that's in the great universal astral pool.
Right.
All the accumulated knowledge of the universe is there and it's available to us. We are implanted with all of that. And so a sensation that we've never come across before could be alien to us, but we might be able to tap into something psychically.
Right.
And be able to determine that it might not be harmful, let's say.
Right.
I mean, this gets kind of out there. I know.
No, this is right along with Zane. Is that last week we did talk about previous experiences, and that you're absolutely right, and all that shows up on your birth chart. your astrological birth chart. All your previous experiences and where you're at is your birth chart. And yeah.
And I think sensations give you access to that information.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, you could, even though it may be there, you don't have access to it until you have some experience through sensation.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I'm processing. I absolutely
Through
agree.
association, through the law of association.
Right.
Like drinking something that's too hot or too cold. You know, you get a
Right.
sensation when you drink too hot coffee that's too hot, or a drink that's too cold. It's like, oh. Or eating ice cream when it freezes your brain. You know.
Right.
Right. That information was always there. You didn't know it yet.
Yeah, but even when that ice cream freezes my brain, I still keep eating it.
That's right.
It's so
we know
tasty.
it's so good.
It's an overriding sensation.
That's right. And then we ignore it after a while. Okay, so yeah, you're right. So he's talking about all consciousness, not just subjective. You're right. So what we perceive is from a combination of sensations modified by our perception. Through resemblance with experiences with other things, they have been recorded in the unconscious mind. That's exactly what you were just saying. The sensations we experience with the apple are retained in the mind in association with each other through contiguity, and they join with other sensations already in the mind through resemblance. All perceptions are fusions of numerous simple sensations. That's just mind-boggling to me, though. I thought there was so much more, and it's a lot of just sensation. And then my perception, and then my categorizing, and then my previous experiences.
Just a little computer out
there. Perceptions fuse to form conceptions. So things having qualities in common give rise to perceptions which through resemblance or contiguity become associated through the thought organization of the unconscious mind. I think that's exactly what you were just saying. Conception. Zane's definition, individual entities having points of resemblance. He was talking about, because he was such a environmental type person, categorizing the animals and classes and phylum. And that's what he was talking about, the conception. Mm-hmm. The dictionary definition is the act or power of forming notions, ideas, or concepts. So a conception is built up somewhat like a double exposure photograph. This is Zane's talking about this. Similar points will show up a lot and dissimilar points won't be as noticeable. If you think about, have you ever seen like a double exposed picture where they line up the eyes and stuff of two different faces? And basically you're looking at the eyes because they're kind of overlapped, and you notice that more than their faces are kind of subdued. And I think that's what he's talking about. Mm-hmm. Ideas are built up similarly. And this is Zane's example. An idea becomes more abstract when it retreats from specific sensations toward more generalities. Example, a Granny Smith apple as opposed to just an apple, or the word fruit as opposed to the word apple.
You know, that composite of all our perceptions about an apple, for instance, I bet that 99.9% of the time, if you say the word apple, everybody envisions a red apple.
Right.
A red apple with a nice sheen on it, kind of shiny.
Right.
Nobody ever thinks of a green apple.
Right.
I don't
Rarely.
think. Well, yeah, it wouldn't happen very often.
No.
Well, even in books, when they picture them, even in cartoon form, it's usually a red apple.
Right.
You know.
And I love Granny Smiths, and I eat them all the time, but I still, when somebody says apple, I picture a red apple. That's true.
So it works.
Yes, it does. So my conception of an apple is red, even though I eat a lot of green ones. Perceptions fuse, okay, so abstract idea, a definition. Zane points in common, a fusion of points in common, which have been derived from so wide a variety of perceptions. It's an abstract idea. Example is the number 10, because it doesn't necessarily bring up to mind specific instances but suggests so wide a scope of possibilities. 10 what? 10 apples, 10 fingers, 10 toes, I guess, so it's kind of abstract. I would use a different example, but I guess that's a simple one. And of course, the dictionary definition is conceived apart from any concrete realities, not applied or practical. Abstract. Although 10 is pretty practical. I don't know. Conceptions unite to become reason. And I like this. I wanted to get a really good, they have optical illusions, but they wouldn't let me, off the internet, they wouldn't let me get any of the optical illusions. Wouldn't allow me to do it. So, anyway.
So what was that?
This
totally
one,
missed the point
see
of
this is colored green,
Yeah.
but the word is yellow.
All right.
And there's some kind of trick where you're supposed to write down in a speedy way. I kept doing it over and over, and I kept getting it wrong, and I kept not understanding the thing. But you're supposed to, like, write how many things are blue. This is blue, this is blue, this is blue, this is blue, this is blue. So, and then, but normally your brain goes to the word blue, even though it's not the color blue. And you might say there's 1, 2, 3 blue things on here, but you'd be wrong.
Okay.
And there's like a test and I don't know.
Okay.
Just put it up there.
Make your brain think. Kind of get away from all this wording up here, you know. There's a lot of it. So, in all reasoning, there is a clear establishment of different states of consciousness. There is an intermediate state of consciousness, however, which by definite associations with objective consciousness and subconsciousness brings about their amalgamation. So I think this, Zane talked about this, and I think that is what we kind of consider when we're thinking of our objective consciousness and our unconsciousness kind of combining together. It almost seems like there is kind of an intermediate state where we're not dealing with new situations, but we still are using our objective consciousness. There's got to be, you know, an intermediate state. I don't know. That's how I perceive this. The filter of the unconscious mind goes into steering the direction of the objective mind. And that comes from that drawing I had where all those things are coming in closer and closer. So your objective consciousness has to go through that lens or that filter of all those things swirling around. It kind of steers where your thoughts are going to go, whether you believe that or not. It doesn't matter. Okay, reason and intuition. We're moving right along. You know what, guys? We might have, this class might be done early because I only have 88 slides, so.
Maybe we can just talk.
Okay. But that's going to be okay, right? We go a little early. Okay, so reasoning happens only when the major steps in the process of arriving at some conclusion are recognized by the objective consciousness. So recognizing the steps at arriving at some conclusion is reasoning. However, reasoning and conception also happens in the unconscious mind as well, while bringing together other mental factors. Thought cells fuse, form pathways, become organized into complex structures, and discharge their accumulated tensions in thought processes in the astral realm as well. So he's saying that also in the astral, there's a reasoning counterpart that's going on. Which makes sense to me. Everything else is over there. These activities take place in obedience to the law of association, whether in the astral realm or in the physical brain realm. Psychoanalytic experiments prove that asleep or awake, man's mind is never still. Trains of thoughts are constantly in motion, many of which never gain recognition by the objective consciousness. That's true. Yeah. You know what just happened to me this afternoon? I think this kind of goes along with this. Is I was taking a nap because I didn't get much sleep last night. And as I'm drifting off, have you guys ever experienced this where you're drifting off and you start kind of have that dream state where you're kind of dreaming? And you don't know you're dreaming. You just, things are going on in your mind. Your mind's still going. Like, oh, you know. Anyway, so in my dream state, it's always mundane. I'm going to reach for a pen. I think I'm going to go write something I thought of. I reach for a pen, and I open up the cap, and there is a dead fly on my pen, on the top of my pen. It's so bizarre. Like, where does that come from, right? I immediately come into objective consciousness because it shocked me so much. Like, why would I see that? And all of a sudden, I came into objective consciousness, and I'm laughing because I'm like, that weird sight that was so alien, like I'd never seen that before, brought me back into objective consciousness. I don't know, so I thought it was very weird.
Well, that is weird.
But oftentimes we'll have that sensation that we're falling in that dream awake state, that our mind is still going. That'll bring us back into objective consciousness, doesn't it?
Right.
That's
So,
I don't know where, I mean, all this stuff is just swirling in my head.
the law, so the law of association, though, the point he's trying to make there is that
It occurs on both planes, the astral and physical.
right.
So here we categorize things, right? Law of association, resemblance, and contiguity.
Right.
And so on the astral plane, that is also happening, I think. So we saying our unconscious is doing the
Right,
same
yeah, I
thing.
get that. But maybe what he said, so do we tend to bring in new information based on, through the law of association, what we can assimilate based on something. We're constantly comparing it to what we already know or
Right.
experienced. And so we're trying to understand the world that way. And
Yes.
it's getting more complex as a result of it.
Right.
Is that what you're trying to say?
That is,
I would
that
say
is a
so.
point that he made from what I read today, is that the overall advancement or evolution of the universe, and not just this planet, but
Right.
every planet, is affected directly by the continual intake of new knowledge, new sensations, new things that are formed by virtue of the laws of association. All those, all the sensations, all the information that we take in, everything is used to advance evolution of the universe, the cosmos.
Right.
And if you haven't got something to associate it with, it's really difficult to understand it. There's no context for it.
Exactly. And that's what opens up your mind, though,
Right.
doesn't it?
Yeah,
I mean,
the
it
willingness
boggles
to
your
have an
mind,
open mind,
you
yeah.
get a little
Well-
jolted, but then all of a sudden, now it's in your unconscious. Now it's part of your worldview, and you can use it. But before it's there, it seems so alien to you often. A lot of people reject it, and they say, no, I don't believe that. I don't believe UFOs exist.
Right.
Because it's not in their, they can't understand it. But once you start hearing all the stories, like I've heard so many stories that it's so much part of my world belief system that I'm just like, oh, you don't believe it? Okay, whatever.
One way to look at this too is Carl Sagan, back when he did the Cosmos series 25, 30 years ago. He basically used a line of linear progression where you've got back here in the primordial muck all of the beings that, whether just on this planet or throughout the universe, all the beings, all the entities, all the life forms that are struggling to gain some foothold out of the primordial muck.
Yeah.
Then you have all along that linear progression different beings of various states of evolutionary advancement. And that's the way the universe is too. I mean, throughout the course of history, however long the history of the cosmos is, however long that may be,
Yeah.
that is true. And it's replayed over and over and over again as beings advance up the evolutionary scale through reincarnations. We get to a point where this is kind of so far out there
No, I love
that
it.
people cannot comprehend what we're sitting here talking about.
Right.
That's why there are only 800 members of the Church of Light as opposed to 800 million. No, seriously.
No, yeah.
And because they are not capable, or for whatever reason, they don't have the
They're not there
open-mindedness.
yet.
They're capable, but they're just not there yet.
Right.
They don't have the open-minded, objective consciousness to be able to process information that allows them to evolve. And so, I don't know where I was going with all that, but I was trying to get to a point, and now I've lost the point.
Right, I do that all the time.
Maybe that is the point.
I think it is, because I think that's great, because when I was 19, I might not have been able to comprehend all of this. But it doesn't mean that my mind wasn't capable of it. And a person 70 years old is also capable of understanding. It's where they want their attention and consciousness to go. Because, you know, some stuff as I come along through, since I was 19, reading stuff and opening my mind, I remember there were times when I just sat there like zombified, finding this new information that I couldn't believe. And now it's a part of me so well that everything's starting to tie into all of this. And everything's starting to make sense with that piece of information that totally blew my mind before.
But to address the issue of why people don't think about it, where does attention go?
Right.
It goes to where your desires are.
Exactly.
And so most people don't have a desire for information like this.
Well,
That's
yeah,
my sense.
people give their time and attention to things that are important to them, whether it's the pre-programmed,
Right.
you know, things that people are drawn to by society, whether it's going out and having a good time, or it's whatever it may be, playing soccer, whatever. But human evolution is advancing in kicks and starts, you know, and kicking and screaming.
Right?
You know, human evolution is happening. The problem is it's not happening fast enough to compensate for the technology, this awesome technology that we have created, that may do us in yet. And you know, every day that we don't learn how to take control of it by advancing our own knowledge of the universe and how we fit into it, we're endangering ourselves and the planet even more. So those of us who want to take some, not stewardship over all of this, but at least help expand consciousness on this level, are the ones who are stepping up. And this is a planetary thing. This is happening. It's difficult to understand. You know, one of the things in reading Zane's words, and I've only been a member for 2 days, but I've been led to this over a course of years and reading many things.
Yes.
One of the difficulties in reading, and I've read 5 of the chapters so far just in 2 days, is that
great.
he's writing in a style that's almost 100 years old.
Yes.
His writings are from 1921 and that era. So it's difficult at times to read and determine, okay, he's got so many commas in here, there's so many, you know.
Long sentences.
Yeah,
That's
but
why
it's,
I'm doing this class.
but the information is critical, and
Right.
it is excellent information, and we have to take the time and effort. We have to make the time and effort as human beings to try to advance our human knowledge base, but too few humans take the time to do it. And that is just all across the board. Whatever country you go to, whatever, you know, ethnic group you're talking about, too few human beings ever, at least in the current state of affairs,
Right.
have ever reached a point where we could say we're evolving. We are evolving, and it's very, very slowly. And the point that I'm trying to make here is that, you know, if people will just put aside this pre-programming, this media influence,
It's hard to do.
the media influences and all the other stuff. Yeah. But we've got to start making strides, because, and it's religion. You talk about the religions of the world, you know, people that are Catholics or Baptists or whatever religion they may be. They are so stuck in that dogma that they can't even begin to open them, if they really believe in those things, that they can't even open themselves up to believe in the possibilities that we are a race or a live being of intelligent design. Okay, that's a term that's come into use in schools now. Oh, we can't teach intelligent design. I'm getting way off topic here.
No, that's all right, because I only have 88 slides and we're on 69.
69, oh, okay.
And this was going to be a discussion class anyway.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
it's perfect.
Well, I'll shut up now. I've said
No,
enough.
I
keep
love it.
losing myself in terms of where it is I'm going with these. Kind of like kind of like a starship that's off course.
No, but I think it's right on course, and I keep seeing. I had the same perception that, my God, what's going on with the planet? What are people doing? What are they focusing on? But there is, on a level that we're not perceiving, I think there's a lot of people very concerned with where the planet is. We're not noticing them yet, but I think they're there, and we're going to start all coming together because we're in the age of Aquarius, which is not only high tech, but it's also, another term for Aquarius is altruism, right? Helping each other, helping humanity, helping humanity. And that is starting to show in the younger people, even though we're not seeing it because if, our perception is what we see on TV, that's not what's showing on TV, obviously. So, I've started to let my mind say, no, I think the people are out there, I just don't know who they are, but I think they're starting to come up in the world.
Right. Well, it's the Saturn and Uranus influence, and we're under a heavy-duty one right now. That Saturn, Pluto, Uranus. I mean Saturn, Uranus opposition that we've been under for about 2 or 3 years now.
Oh, okay.
Which we were under during the last Great Depression.
Oh.
And one of the things that happens in that is that all the structures Uranus does number on all of our systems and our order and our structure.
Levels them.
It shakes them up. Yeah, and I think we're in a phase like that. And I think Aquarius particularly has that influence. And we're relatively in the beginning phases of the Aquarian age. So, we're not really accustomed, human beings are not accustomed to dealing with the intensity of vibration, I think, that we're having to deal with right now. Technology just generates a ton of new energy.
Sure. A lot of the information that Zane tapped into has been the result of information that was lost, through the eons. And that he was able to access it through the mystery schools, through the great library of Alexandria that was lost. All of this, over time, has been there. Human history has, by war, by natural disaster, but mostly by war and power struggles, has sought to suppress it. And so now, hopefully, people will start reaching out, and as you're talking about, especially younger people, will start reaching out to learn the real truth.
Right.
This is the real truth. This is not, and I would hope that there's a movement in that direction, because if we don't have a widespread movement of that sort very soon, we may not be around long enough to have the objective consciousness anymore.
Right. We'll all go to the astral realm.
Yeah, but then again, that's probably a good thing.
No, I think we're,
as long as I'm going to a higher plane and not a lower one.
If you go back and read things that were written hundreds of years ago, they had the same feeling about the world they lived in that we're just now describing. They thought the world was going to hell in a handbasket, right?
But they didn't have 2,000 nuclear weapons parked on their doorstep.
Oh, but they had plague.
Right.
Oh, the plague.
There's always something.
No, it's a plague. If it's not a plague, it's an earthquake.
Right. There's always something to be concerned about. But that's the conflict that he was talking about that causes us to reach out and deal and solve problems. And life on this plane it has conflict.
It does.
It's just a good thing, actually.
It is, because, it's so funny that you say that, because I took a screenwriting class in college, and they said every scene that you write has to have conflict. I'm like, so irritated by that. And then I realized
it's not interesting without it.
Exactly. And I saw a movie, a really, really bad movie made that didn't have much conflict, and I was like, oh my God. Please, give me a little conflict.
Life is boring without conflict.
And conflict is a bad connotation. I think of conflict as two heads butting. But conflict can just be an energy of attention. It can just be tension.
It's a stress.
It's a stress that needs to happen.
To resolve. And you get effort to resolve.
And that gets us moving, going forward.
That's where his terminology comes into play, because he talks about tension created by the positive and the negative.
Right.
And, that it goes right back to what you were just saying.
Yeah.
It has to be there. It's a natural part of the cosmic makeup.
Right.
So it has to be there for anything to happen.
Exactly.
Well, now that we figured that out.
Yes.
Okay, now that we figured it out, the thing we have to do is remember, oh, maybe we don't know everything.
Exactly.
Let's open our minds.
Well, we're here.
We're
Here we
here. And everybody out there is here. Yes.
You have a comment here on your
Okay.
your pen dream.
Go ahead.
You want to hear it?
Yeah, read it.
This is Renee.
Renee.
It says the pen in Yvette's dream is thoughts expressed to me. She took off the cap, opening up her thoughts,
Oh, wow.
letting the old thoughts out, like the dead fly.
Oh, that's awesome. That is really awesome. I
Wait a
love
minute.
it.
What
Did
was
you hear that?
what was the dead fly? I'm interested in the fly.
The old thoughts.
The old thoughts.
This fly was
She
dead.
opened the cap.
Oh, there was a dead fly in there.
And
I thought it was
dead
alive.
fly no, a dead
Okay.
fly on the tip of my
Oh, okay.
pen. Like, weird. That makes so much sense, Renee. Thanks. I love that. And that's exactly what's going on doing this class. My thoughts are so, like, pinging with all these neurons, and I'm very excited about all this stuff I'm learning, or making connections, I think, to all this other information that I had. That my mind is just pinging with excitement, and I think you're right. The dead fly is old, old thoughts.
It's your old way of thinking, maybe, about things.
Yeah, I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Huh.
Either that or the fly took all the ink out of the pen and died.
It could be that. I think she likes the first
Yeah, the first one is better. Yeah.
Okay, so, well, we might as well finish here. We got a half hour left. So we're on slide 70, which is great. I think it's perfect timing. So now we're talking about intuition. And Zane's definition of intuition is like a process similar to reasoning being carried out by the unconscious mind. I don't quite agree with some of the stuff I read about his idea of intuition, but, you know,
Why
I'll
not?
get
If
to
you
it.
don't agree with it, why not?
I'll get to it.
Oh, okay.
We're going to get to slides and it talks about it more. But that's Zane's definition. So basically, reasoning being carried out in the unconscious. And the dictionary definition of intuition is direct perception of truth and fact, independent of any reasoning process. A fact, a truth, knowledge perceived in this way, through intuition. A keen and quick insight. So the dictionary definition is saying that intuition is fact and truth.
Well, where does that fact and truth come from? Just there?
I believe it comes from the astral. The dictionary is not going to talk about the astral. It says it comes from the intuition. But so Zane, I think, is right. It's coming from the astral plane, the unconscious mind. But Zane is, as I get to the next slide, Zane says that intuition might not be accurate.
Well, it might not. You may not interpret it correctly.
But I think that's, if it's really intuition, then it comes through as often. Anyway, I'll see if it comes to my mind what I was thinking.
Okay.
As I read. So intuition explained by Zane is when a problem is presented or interest is aroused by some subject, our attention is focused upon this interest or desire. The energies directed through the law of association connect up with the various factors in the unconscious mind that have a bearing upon the matter. If the interest is keen enough, it may stimulate the psychic senses of the astral body to pick up additional information from the astral plane. The law of association then brings together all the available information from the unconscious mind, and having an influence upon the thing under consideration, a conclusion emerges. So I agree with all of this. I mean, it makes sense to me, what he's saying here. He's saying that it's on the astral plane and consciousness through psychic senses and reasoning. But he's saying that it's based on your focused attention, which I've had intuition on things I'm not even, thinking about, I don't think. You know what I'm saying? Like, there was this person one time approached me in the parking lot, and from the outer appearance, he looked fine. His speech was fine. He asked, he talked to me very nicely. My intuition or gut feeling was saying, do not give him very much information. There is something wrong. And for the life of me, my reasoning mind was saying, there's absolutely nothing wrong with this person. He seems totally nice. My intuition kept saying, no, 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 don't go there. Don't engage him much longer. So, you know what I'm saying? I'm saying my reasoning mind was saying one thing, but my intuition was saying another. And I believe you should rely on your intuition in that manner, in that type of manner. Because your reasoning mind is saying there's nothing wrong here.
And you should, because you've learned to trust that. But sometimes you do. I think you get an intuition, and the conclusion that you may draw is not complete yet, or it
may not be complete.
It may steer you in the right direction
if
you pursue it, but it's still you haven't been able to really formulate the information maybe that your unconscious mind has available to you. You just have this intuition, this guidance to move in a direction.
I like that. That makes a lot more sense to me there.
I'm going to offer another angle on this too from some other reading that I've done. We've got super consciousness or super ego.
Right.
That
universal consciousness.
Right. That's connected to the Almighty, to God, and whatever term you want to apply.
Yep.
And the super consciousness or super ego will communicate directly with the unconscious mind. Okay, and vice versa, without ever going through the objective consciousness.
Right.
Okay, it does happen.
Right. Yeah.
And so you may receive information in terms of, in the form of intuition, that while your objective consciousness is telling you, oh, everything's fine, you may be getting a direct communication through the super consciousness to the unconscious mind.
Right.
Or however it happens.
Right.
That is really more true and is much more reliable, although you couldn't verify it. You couldn't say factually, oh, I know that that's going to be true, because it's you may be getting mixed signals on the conscious plane.
Right.
But the real truth of the matter may lie below the surface, and it's being communicated to you from the astral plane.
Right. And that's why I believe that I would like to, well, Zane says you should rely on your intuition. Or it's probably on the next slide. Barbara, was there something you wanted to say? No? Okay. So Zane's continuing on with his explanation of intuition. The conclusion that on the psychic senses reached is a result of a process similar to reasoning, but carried out below the threshold of objective consciousness, or in the unconscious world. And the conclusion may be reached instantly because there is no need to impart energy to the physical brain cells in each operation, and also because the astral plane is frictionless, which we find out. When the attention is directed to some situation, the unconscious mind may reach a conclusion, and objective consciousness may never be aware that such a conclusion has been reached. So so there was something going on in the astral world, in my subconscious or unconscious, and that my objective consciousness wasn't seeing the whole process going on, and all of a sudden this thing comes up, and I'm like, huh, this doesn't correlate with my reasoning mind. Objective consciousness is only aware that a conclusion has been reached when conditions are present and etheric energies impress the conclusion to the cells of the physical brain. Again, the etheric is the energy transfer body. When the conclusion arises, apparently fully formed and spontaneously into objective consciousness, it is called intuition. So that's Zane's explanation of intuition, how it comes up. Intuition is like a process similar to reasoning being carried out by the unconscious mind.
So what was there that you didn't quite agree with?
No, I agreed with all of that. There was, I think I actually took out what I didn't agree with.
Good idea.
It's in the book.
Your intuition is once again served you well.
And this seemed like it was going on for a long time anyway, all these slides, and kept adding slides. So, I made a executive decision and took it out because I didn't quite agree with it. So, but it's in the book, so you can read it for yourselves and make your own decisions. There we go. Okay. So many more facts are discernible in the astral plane than in the physical plane. If those facts are unwarped while coming through from the astral region of the unconscious, those facts are apt to be a far more reliable guide to the truth than clumsy and ponderous reason. It is well to cultivate the intuition because it may be made to yield such accurate conclusions. So he is talking about accurate, but this, and I agree that there's things that can come in from the unconscious that are warped by all the things that the unconscious is taking in.
By what you don't know or don't know about something.
And so I do believe that you can get things that are warped. But I guess what I'm distinguishing is when an intuition comes that goes against my rational reasoning mind, like a sense of a person, I am going to trust the intuition. Because in that case, it doesn't matter. I don't have to trust my reasoning mind because I didn't know that person and I didn't have to communicate with them. It didn't mean anything to me. So, you know what I'm saying? So, but I do believe that there are times when I am getting things from the unconscious and I'm like, that could just be my belief and the truth might be something other than that. So that can kind of come in warped. So I do agree with those things.
Right.
Because those facts that may be coming in from the astral plane to give you the intuition that it's trying to impart to you can definitely be affected by the laws of association, by the resemblance and contiguity of those preperceptions or apperceptions that you have.
That's right, because maybe that guy resembled somebody I'd forgotten long ago that I encountered when I was a kid that I didn't like.
Right.
I have no idea. I don't remember that.
Right.
But my unconscious is being aware of that, and all of a sudden, by a lot of associations associating, and it could be warped, but in that case it didn't matter, because I don't need to.
It didn't have any consequences.
Right. Didn't have any consequences.
You didn't have any negative experience.
Right, and yeah, exactly.
But I have an experience that I just had today, and I don't want to make it long, but I have a progression that's going on. It's been going on for a few months now, and it's an ascendant opposition, my moon.
Okay.
And so I found that, okay, that sounds like there may be some sort of an illness, some sort of health matter is going to come up for me.
Oh.
But I was having a hard time pegging exactly what that might be. So I've been alert and kind of paying attention and trying to figure it out, and went to have my physical, and lo and behold, I get a call from the doctor says, I'd like for you to come back in and discuss some of the test results. And so I went in today, and it turns out that what it is that I have just barely, and he's not even sure that it is a problem, but it's just barely evidence of some thyroid.
Oh, okay.
And so I'm going, oh. And immediately my mind went to pituitary mood. And so I used that information, but it was more of an instinct. It was, I've had this instinct that something's going on. And maybe that's not what, it's like an intuition, but it's an intuition. It's something going on the unconscious mind. I have this conscious information that's going on, but I can't integrate the two. I don't have the right words. I don't have the capability of understanding all the medical stuff that might be going on. But what my intuition led me to do was, pituitary, and all of a sudden, pharmaca came to me. The local, little pharmacy that we have, that's a natural pharmacy.
Oh, it's like a store. Oh, okay.
So I thought, okay, I'm going to go there. And sure enough, I walk in the door, this woman comes up to me and says, can I help you? And I look at her, and my normal response would be, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Except today I said, and I told her what had happened, and I said, and for some reason, and I told her also that I'm an astrologer and that I have this aspect, and lights go on all over the place for her, and so she takes that information I gave her, and she comes back, and she says, it may be your pituitary, but I think there are these underlying factors. And so I was able to take this sort of intuitive push to go there.
Right.
And she was able to present to me some information that I realized, that's it.
That's what you
I know that's my solution. I'm confident. Now it may turn out not to be, But right now, I feel very confident that I'm going to be able to address this through a nutritional means, which is what I wanted to do.
Right.
And
absolutely, and you trusted that intuition,
I
even though
yes.
it didn't have all the
I didn't
facts
have all the
and-
information
and
yet.
everything, but you had that intuitive push, and you trusted it, and it led you into the right direction where you needed to go.
Right.
Yes, I think those things are great when that's happening.
So I thought that was,
Yeah, absolutely. Goes
So
along
it's
right
sort of
along
this
with
reasoning thing that's going on both on the conscious level and the unconscious level, but pulling those two together sometimes is really tough.
Right. With the
Doesn't
reason
make sense, yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes you just gotta take that off and let the good stuff come in.
Shut off the left brain and
Let it guide you.
But the more you practice, the better you get at it, I think.
I think so. And Zane actually talks about that. I think it's probably on one of these slides, so we'll get to it. About that if you rely on that and you keep relying on it and trust that it's going to be accurate, it's like a muscle, it'll build up and it'll work for you. And I think it's on one of these slides.
Your intuition muscle.
Yes, intuition muscle. Everything's a muscle in my brain. Okay, so many more. Oh, I already read that. There it is. It is well to cultivate intuition because it may be made to yield such accurate conclusions. It should be recognized that the range of perception through the use of psychic senses of the astral body is vastly greater than that of physical brain. And there is a vast number of facts and impressions long forgotten by the objective consciousness, which is stored in the astral realm, which the unconscious can draw from. Also, after we have left the physical body, reason, which is dependent upon physical brain cells, can no longer offer guidance. It's just going to be our intuition and the astral.
Will we get a new brain though?
I think we'll have, I think we'll have our same brain and all the thoughts we have here, and we're just going to figure it out over there. This is where it was. Confidence should be placed in the unconscious to form correct conclusions, and to find the opportunity to project them up into the physical brain cells as intuition, which can be felt as a feeling or an inner sense. Hard to describe, but we all kind of know when we feel it.
Yeah.
Hard to use physical world.
So there you go.
Snake oil.
Is that what you recommend?
That's what, that's exactly what it is.
Am I only here? I feel like I'm, lost in something else. Oh, suggestion. Okay, I think this is one of the last sections anyway. Reason and intuition are off. Oh, this is the part. This is why I put it in parentheses with question mark. Because Zane said reason and intuition are often warped and distorted due to the influence of some dominant idea or belief system we have. Which, that's probably right. But I'm just thinking of the word intuition as something different. I would like to put like the word unconscious there. Reason and the unconscious mind are often warped and distorted due to the
Well,
Yeah, sorry, you go ahead.
yeah.
that just brought to mind, not something that I know directly, but I am in the news business, so I get these wide variety of stories that I run into every day. And you take somebody who has a strong religious belief, like in Utah, there were a couple of parents there that let their child die from a preventable illness.
Yeah.
All they had to do was go with the doctor's recommendation. Well, but still, the mother especially might have gotten the intuition, she might have been getting strong signals from her intuition that told her to believe what the doctor was recommending, but yet her beliefs, in this case, warped that recommendation. That she may, I don't know that she did, but she may have, especially with mothers, they can oftentimes know that, maybe the father was insistent upon adhering to the strict religious belief that they, and that happens within religious structures. They oftentimes will tend to be dogmatic about their beliefs to the detriment of their intuition about some things.
Right. Yeah. But so that's why I didn't like that word intuition. I prefer a different word because I feel like intuition is more accurate, whereas your unconscious mind can have all that warped in belief system.
But I don't think that intuition is necessarily accurate unless you've allowed it or trained it to, unless you've created an unemotional, objective environment for it to operate in. I've seen plenty of intuitions that are just dead wrong.
Well, then maybe I wouldn't call the word intuition. I would call it something
What comes
else.
up is an intuition. That's what people would call it.
Okay. All right.
And
guess
I
I'm
think
just
that's why
distinguishing
he
the
says
words.
you have to cultivate it.
Well, you could say
Yeah.
suspicions,
But
reason and suspicion. Well, I don't know.
I guess I just prefer to use another word. We can use that word for here, but in my mind, intuition is something different than the warped things that come from your unconscious that are distorted from beliefs and everything else. I want to separate those two for some reason. I just do.
It's your intuition talking.
Yes. I'd rather just say your unconscious mind, which has all this stuff going on. And that is going to warp your beliefs and your objective consciousness. But your intuition, I feel like it's separate. But anyway, we'll get off of it. Moving on. We're almost done, and we get 10 minutes left. Yay! All right. An organized group of thought cells can have so much energy that they can determine what impressions shall and shall not be imparted to the cells of the physical brain. Okay. Emotions often add energy. We talked a little bit about emotions. I think he's going to talk more about emotions as we go. He just doesn't in this chapter. Emotions often add energy in unusual volume to the thought cells relating to some conception, especially those emotions experienced in early childhood before critical faculties have acquired sufficient experience to appraise values and evidence. So,
Yvette?
yeah.
Anne-Marie makes an interesting comment.
Okay.
She says, I think that fear and fearful feelings can warp the intuition. They certainly warp reason.
Fear can warp intuition. I could kind of agree with that. Absolutely. Yeah. I would kind of agree with that. And so then that would take my theory away where I wanted intuition to be right all the time. But that's good. Won't put it in my brain.
It's a cute.
When an idea attains an inordinate amount of power through energy added to it, it is then able to dominate the unconscious mind to such an extent that no perceptions, impressions, or facts in conflict with it can impart energy to the physical brain cells. It becomes a sensor or a filter, and anything that gets objective recognition must subscribe to its filters, policies, and beliefs. I would say that it goes along exactly what you're talking about with religious belief systems. If you come across information that doesn't subscribe to your religious belief systems, and that can be your filter, that's a belief filter, then you won't believe it, whether it's proven over and over and the government says, no, it's fact. If your belief system doesn't subscribe to it, you might not accept it as fact. And imagine all these people walking around, and they all have their different beliefs. They're seeing the world in such a different view than everybody is, I just thinking about that.
So, yeah, so many people
fascinating.
they've been allowed themselves to be brainwashed, whether it's by a political system
Yes.
or by a religious culture or whatever it may be. And that's the danger that we face as a planet and as a world. Yeah, we've got to raise consciousness, and we've got to do it quickly. We've got to, and I don't know that it's going to be able to be accomplished in
It will
time.
be. I'm faithful in that.
Well, I'm hopeful that it doesn't.
Positive thinking.
I don't know that we won't have to go through a calamity before we get to the point where consciousness will be raised.
I might
by the
agree
very
with you
necessity
there.
of it having to be raised.
I might agree with you there, though. Absolutely.
Well, you could say our appetite for fossil fuels has certainly created a condition where we could have a calamity like we have in the Gulf Coast right now.
No,
Yep.
I mean, we've known for many years that, hey, we ought to be seeking some other source.
Exactly. I think it said, maybe I should quote that right now, but anyway. I was going to quote something. But when concentrating the attention and energy upon a given idea or image, suggestion is similar to a belief filter or a sensor. So he's just talking about suggestion. It is not necessary that a person be asleep or in a trance to be susceptible to suggestion. I absolutely agree with that. It is merely necessary that the critical faculties shall be off guard or held in abeyance. The time to advantageously administer suggestion is when a person is in a state something between awake and asleep, in which the person is aware of what is being said but does not analyze the statements nor recognize inconsistencies. That's like when in that dream awake state, as you're starting to fall asleep, all these thoughts are going through my head, but it feels like it's just reality. And anything could be suggested to me at that point. Like somebody could be talking in the background, and I would take that in at that state. You're so susceptible to suggestion, and that's absolutely true. The objective mind can give its attention fully to any one thing, but in a very limited field at any one time, as we discussed with the senses and the objective consciousness can only do one thing at a time. Well, not one thing, but a certain amount of things. When the attention is completely occupied by one thought or one sense impression, all other thoughts or sense impressions are shut off from the consciousness. Oh, if a hypnotic operator suggests to a subject that a stick is a snake, the mental image of the snake becomes so blended with the sense reports regarding the stick that the two are blended and the subject sees the stick as a snake. He feels and acts toward it just as if he really was a snake. To give the image power, as many do, as many and as strong desires are appealed to as possible. What? To give the image power, as many and as strong desires are appealed to as possible. It is the energy of desire that leads to action, as any salesman may know. Oh, here's one of those things. Does that thing look like it's moving? Just by looking at it?
Well,
No, not quite.
no, but I've seen things like that.
Yeah.
It's called persistence of vision.
Yeah, I wanted to
And
get one. I finally found one that I could put up, but
it's nice to look at.
Yeah.
You know, if you kind of look at it off axis, it can start to move on you.
Yeah.
Right.
It does have that.
right.
Right. If you
There's a
move
lot on
if
the
you move
internet.
like this, yeah.
There's a lot on those things on the internet.
It's
So when
pulsing
they-
at me.
Yeah.
Right.
I thought it was good. Okay, so the title was Apperception and Preperception in Psychic Work, and there's only a couple of slides of this. So, people who don't think they have any psychic abilities may be able to make accurate predictions. By using the law of association, apperceptions and preperceptions, one may divine the future by bringing up into the objective consciousness that which is perceived by the senses of the astral body, or that which is in the unconscious mind. The psychic senses function on the astral plane and are able to perceive a great variety of facts concerning a person, place, or thing which may be inaccessible to the objective consciousness. By combining these three factors, law of association, apperception, and preperception, the unconscious mind is able to deduce conclusions regarding the present and the future. Normal consciousness people are unable to project the conclusions up into the physical brain cells with sufficient force to receive recognition into the consciousness unless they are a gifted seer or use artificial aids. Apperception and preperception cause something to be seen which is suggested by the unconscious mind. Something can be seen in the divinatory instruments, such as tea leaves, tarot cards, which will represent information possessed by the unconscious mind. The unconscious mind, under this impetus, has sought out information and has had its attention focused upon it. The nerve current set in motion by the physical sense of sight connects up, through the law of association, with an image or information which the unconscious mind's attention is focused upon in the astral. This is the last one. The image in the unconscious mind finds the necessary electric energy available to which it can impart its motions with sufficient intensity to impact and get registered upon the physical brain cells. The apperception can contribute so much energy that the physical perception is made to resemble the apperception. If the image of a dog is in the unconscious mind, then the unconscious mind can make any object that it sees so strongly resemble a dog that the thought of a dog will register in the objective mind. This, and in most divinatory instruments where there are a wide variety of images to grasp from, the conscious attention is easily directed by the unconscious mind to such an image that will enable the information it is striving to convey to gain recognition in the objective consciousness. This is the summary of the whole chapter that we just did. So, starting with the energy of desire for significance, the soul acquires the ability to feel sensations. Sensations combine together to form perceptions, and perceptions combine together to form conceptions. Conceptions unite to produce those mental processes that lead to a conclusion presented to the objective consciousness that we call intuition. And if we consciously recognize the steps to the conclusion, then we call it reason. And see you the following Sunday, June 27th, from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. The end. Dun 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 dun.
What if there are any questions from out there?
That was a lot of reading. Any questions, Barb?
Renee makes a comment, when we are fearful, we often cannot have relaxed sleep, and mostly through relaxed sleep that we can hope to connect with the intuitive thing that we need to do.
I agree. Fear is an unreliable factor, I've discovered. It's very unreliable. It brings in your emotions, you know?
Unfortunately, fear is the driving force of the human race from the beginning of time. I mean, the fear, you stop and think about it. It's not the only driving force, but it has been the predominant driving force.
Yeah.
Whether it's fear of somebody having more than you have, fear of losing control of a situation, fear of whatever it may be fear of, it's always been one of the major driving forces. And that's where we have to supersede our thinking. We have to get over this irrational fear of fear.
Right.
Like Winston Churchill said, you know,
Only thing that fear
is fear itself. Was he the one that said that?
I think it was Roosevelt.
Roosevelt, okay. Oh, one of those old guys.
Yeah, one of the older dudes.
Yeah. Yeah. I realized when I stopped fearing so many things, everything just became easier. Not that those things aren't important and that I have to pay attention to them, sure, but the fear was something that created all this energy that I didn't need to expend on that.
Right, irrational. fear.
Irrational. It was irrational. A lot of fear is irrational.
Yeah.
Yes.
Belinda comments, I wonder if intuition can be affected by very strong thought cell structure,
Yes.
and if very discordant, your intuition in this area would affect and not be trustworthy.
Yeah. I'm sure we're going to be talking about, I would agree with that, and I'm sure we're going to be talking about that more as the weeks go by, because Zane just kind of builds upon each chapter, and we keep going, so I agree. I think we're getting past our time, though, so.
Well, thank you, Yvette. That was fun.
Thank you
guys for
everybody for
coming.
tuning in.
Thank you. And we'll see you in a week and a half, Sunday, June 27th. Goodbye.